Hey guys, welcome to my YouTube channel. In this video, you're actually going to be able to watch a conversation between myself and Sylvia. And Sylvia is someone who I've met in this online language learning community, and I actually invited her to come and join me for my podcast. So you're going to be listening to the conversation which we had for my podcast, Ace Talks Language, and I'll leave a link to my podcast in the video description. But I thought I'd post it here as well and share it with you guys. In the video description, you'll see timestamps so that you can see when we talked about different things. So if there's a specific section that you want to go and watch and a specific section which you find interesting, you can feel free to skip right to it because it's going to be a long video. And also I'll make sure that it comes up as chapters so that you can see it when you're moving around and skipping around in the YouTube video. All right, so let's get right into it. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another podcast episode. Today is another episode which will be with a guest. So I'm here with Sylvia.
Hello.
So I'm also very excited for this episode. I think it'll be really interesting. And I mean, let's get straight into it. I'm going to be learning just as much as everyone else is going to be learning. Because, yeah, like I said just before we started, I've been following you on Instagram, but at the same time, you know, I don't know that much about you other than what you've posted. So hopefully I'll be learning a lot of new things. I think naturally we can start with a super open-ended, like, who are you? What do you do? What's your life look like at the moment? I know you're in Morocco, which is super interesting. Yes. We can get into all of that.
Yeah, so I'm Sylvia. I'm 19. I'm currently taking a gap year before I start university, and I'm spending most of that year, at least for right now, in Morocco, working here, studying Arabic, especially Moroccan Darija. And yeah, I'm super interested in languages. That's sort of the main thing about me. Learning a few. Probably got into it about like 3 or 4 years ago. And yeah, that's like the main thing I do, honestly, is study languages.
Yeah. Nice. Hey, so we're the same age. You're 19, I'm 19. We're both into languages. That is kind of cool. Right. Yeah. And you're from the States, right? You're from the United States.
Yeah, I'm from Michigan.
Right. Okay. All right. Very cool. Very, very cool. We got someone from the United States. We got someone from Australia. This is going to be fun.
Yeah. Last time you had the girl from last time was from a bunch of places too. So you already got a big diversity on this podcast.
Yeah, she had a really interesting upbringing. That was interesting to hear about. I mean,
yeah.
What about you? For me personally, I had a very, very monolingual English upbringing. What was it like for you in Michigan? I assume that's where you were born. Not just
actually, I was born in New York,
okay.
But I've lived in Toronto for a little while, but mostly grew up in Michigan. But yeah, actually, both of my parents are bilingual, but I was raised just with English, as happens in the United States. So yeah. My dad is German, so I was exposed to
Hold on.
very
the internet
minimal
cut out.
German growing up. Although,
yeah, the internet cut out right as you started talking about your dad. So,
okay. So my dad is German, so I was raised with sort of minimal German growing up. Although my dad moved to the United States when he was just a kid, so he's pretty much American as well. So, I mean, just like little bits, I would hear him talking on the phone to my grandparents or a word here and there, but really I was raised with just English.
Yeah. And what about your mom?
Yeah. So she's also, she actually learned Russian in college and studied abroad in Russia. So she speaks conversationally fluent Russian just from having learned it. And it's funny because I always say, even though like I'm not Russian, I probably had a better chance of her speaking that to me than my dad, just because she's more into the language, more into languages than he is. But She always says she tried to speak it to me growing up, but that she didn't know like baby Russian since it wasn't her native language.
Yeah.
And I tell her like, I would be fine if I just knew medical Russian, but okay.
Medical Russian.
Yeah,
Is your mom in the
because she
medical
tells me,
profession?
yeah, she's like a medical anthropologist. So,
Oh, that is a
yes.
job title. I'm not quite
Yes.
sure what that means. That sounds very interesting.
Anthropology is, I'm very interested in anthropology too. It's, the study of, I would just say like cross-cultural studies. So how things work differently in different cultures. And within that, there's like linguistic anthropology, there's medical anthropology, there's different subfields.
Right. Right.
Hmm.
I
So
I,
she
I
was
knew
studying like,
I knew anthropology in isolation. Right. So it's
right,
anthropology but looking into kind of medical the medical discipline across societies and in human society.
exactly.
Ooh,
Hmm.
interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
My parents actually met learning French, which is kind of a cool story.
Oh, that's so
But yeah,
cool.
but I was also raised monolingual.
So so your parents met learning French, and then you also later learned French, but they didn't teach it to you.
Yeah, exactly. That's
Okay.
exactly it. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And so how did you find yourself in Morocco? How did that opportunity arrive? Like, because I was
Um,
looking a little bit at your Instagram, and you weren't originally learning Moroccan Arabic. You were learning obviously modern
no,
standard Arabic, but then also uh the Syrian
Syrian.
dialect.
Hmm. Yeah,
Right.
exactly. So, it's interesting with my other languages. I feel like I'm more decided I wanted to learn them. I got interested in them. Whereas with Arabic, all the varieties, I sort of fell into it, and then it sort of ended up happening. So, yeah, I've been learning Arabic for the past about 2.5 years because I work with a Syrian family in the U.S. So then I started learning the Syrian dialect. But I mean, this year with COVID, I had so many plans for how I was going to spend this year that
Yeah.
were constantly being changed and moved around. I thought I was going to spend most of the year in Germany, really working on my German, um, which I don't know. We'll see if I get there eventually. But yeah, then this opportunity came up from another future classmate who is an international student from Morocco and had worked with this company here who hires people from abroad. So yeah, I like got in touch with this company, and yeah, I'm like working with them.
Right. Right. So what's the company?
So it's a company that helps high school students apply to university in the US and abroad. So I'm basically I'm working in English basically because most of the people there want to come to study in the US. So they already have like a high level of English. So I'm doing like lots of like SAT prep, IELTS and
Ooh.
TOEFL prep, like essay editing help, advice about like college lists and stuff. So, yeah.
Right. Or is that because, well, I suppose but you also did just come from an Arabic class, right? That's what you were doing like immediately
Yeah.
before this call.
Yes. So, as a language person, obviously, I'm not gonna come to Morocco and not learn the language. And yeah, that's one thing. Having learned, so yeah, I was studying Modern Standard and then Syrian Arabic, which are definitely useful here. Like people will mostly understand me if I try to speak in Syrian or throw in some like standard words. Um, but for me, a big part of why I learn languages is I really want to be able to connect with people in like a natural and easy way, be able to speak their language. And really, if you're in Morocco, like Syrian Arabic is not their language. The difference between Arabic dialects, for people don't know, is very huge. So, like Syrian and Moroccan, I mean, I approach it almost as like Spanish and Italian or something, where like the grammar is going to help you. You're going to have a lot of vocab. You're going to have a lot of knowledge. If you speak one well, you can learn the other one to like an intermediate level fairly quickly. But at the same time, there are lots of differences in pronunciation and vocab and some grammar. So when I found out or decided to come here, I was like, okay, let me start learning Moroccan Arabic as well. And actually another girl from Instagram who I talked to a little bit, and she's from Morocco. So I reached out to her, see if she wanted to do some sort of like language exchange. She's also learning German. So like if she wanted to do some language exchange, she basically just offered to teach me Moroccan Arabic. So I've been having like video calls with her and we've become good friends. She's been teaching me the last few months. And then once I came here, I found like some courses here to take. Darija is what it's called.
Yeah.
So I'm doing that like 5 mornings a week, taking Darija classes.
Okay. Very cool. Mm-hmm. And so how long have you been in Morocco for so far? Not sure if you said.
About a month.
Okay. So you've been, okay. And what's it been like?
It's been amazing. I'm loving it, honestly. Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, like there are so many things about being in a new place. Like you're hearing new sounds, new smells, new food. Like what do you like? I know you're obviously working from what you said with this company, but also like, are you going to markets? Are you like trying new food, like spicy Moroccan food? And like, what's that been like?
Definitely. Yeah, I'm pretty busy all the time, but I'm trying to get out and see things as much as possible. So I've been to the market a few times. It's very cool. Yeah, it'd be different than anything in the US or Australia or Europe. Actually want to go. I just learned the names of all these spices because I want to buy the spices to make this tea that I usually make. So I'm going to go there and try to do that. That will be a little adventure. But the food is really good too. I'm actually vegetarian, so Moroccan food's not the most vegetarian friendly. But I mean, any place like you can find something, or they can make it without chicken, then it's fine. So yeah, it's been really nice. Me and I'm staying here in my apartment with like one other girl who's working at the same place and is going to go to school with me next year. And she's actually also just randomly really into languages. So that's really fun that we can like.
Is she American?
She's Polish, actually.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm living here in Morocco with someone from Poland.
Exactly. That's exactly what I was thinking. Morocco. Yeah. Morocco is a really interesting place. I remember reading about the languages in Morocco quite a long time ago, but I still remember it. So you've got Moroccan Arabic, but then also you've got some French in there. You've got Berber, which I think is the native language, and then, or one of them. There's probably a few, but I think it's a major one. Yeah, and then also a little bit of Spanish, even, but to a much lesser extent. Yeah. Which is obviously
you pretty much nailed it on the head.
Right. But that'd be a very interesting place. Like, when you're walking along the street, what are you hearing? What languages are you hearing?
Yeah. So I'm in Rabat, which is the capital. And I don't want to like say I'm some expert on Morocco or the linguistic situation, but just from my experience, in the cities, it tends to be mostly Moroccan Arabic. That's just like the language of communication, what people speak. So when I'm just walking, that's what I hear. However, there's also a lot of French. French is very prevalent, and I've been told that it's more prevalent in Rabat than maybe some other cities. So maybe I have a little bit skewed version. But any sort of high-end place, if you walk into like a nice restaurant or cafe, they're probably going to start speaking to you in French, which is where I come and I have to tell them like in Darija, I'm like, "Ma kana hadesh le français," like I don't speak French.
I don't speak French. That's hilarious.
Yeah,
because they probably think anyone who looks remotely European was probably
for sure, exactly
right. So they think they're French.
So with
That's
the fancy
fascinating.
places, yeah, the fancy places, sometimes they're a little bit snobby almost that I don't speak French.
Mm.
um, then I try to use Arabic or English if they speak it. But actually, that's like one of the most interesting things I think is from my travels in the past in like Jordan and India. As soon as they realize you're a foreigner, they start speaking to you in English, right?
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, I know that one.
whereas,
I don't know the French
yeah,
one,
we
but
all
I
know that
know
one.
this English one. Yeah.
Well, maybe you should come visit Morocco with your French because as soon as they realize you're a foreigner, it's French, not English.
No way.
Um,
That's the
yeah,
dream.
which is super.
That is
Yeah,
the dream.
right.
Well, at least for me, having
Yeah,
French
yeah,
is my kind of strong foreign language.
right. Actually, I completely prefer it because then I get to turn around with the I don't speak French, and it
We have to speak Arabic
unless they
now.
speak a little English, we have to speak Arabic,
That's
which I've never
fantastic.
experienced that before.
That's the
Yeah,
dream.
I know,
Morocco is the
right?
place to be. Wow.
Exactly. And everyone was asking me like, "Oh, are you going to learn some French?" Or before I was like wondering, should I learn some? And now having been, I mean, obviously not saying I would never learn French one day, but I'm almost using it to my advantage that I don't speak it.
Yeah. I've always
Yeah.
I've always thought it would be uh, I've never felt that my French was good enough to do this, but it might be the next time I go somewhere. But I'm
Mhm.
almost felt like lying and saying when there's this
I thought
communication
the same
thing,
thing.
saying no, English isn't my native language. I speak only
Yeah.
French because there's less of a chance they're going to speak that than English, and then we'd be
Right.
forced to use like I don't know Spanish
Yeah.
or for in your case
Yeah.
Arabic.
I've been really tempted to do that in German before, but I feel like people also expect Germans to speak pretty good English.
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
I feel like it hasn't really worked, but
Yeah. And then you'd speak with this perfect American accent, or in my case, an Australian
right,
accent.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it wouldn't necessarily hold up.
Wouldn't really work, yeah. But yeah, just quickly in terms of like the other languages, there so the native language here, which I believe they prefer to go by Tamazight is the name of the language. Berber, I think, is more of a outdated term.
Okay. Okay. My bad.
Um, no, it's okay. I think that's something that's like currently like changing. A lot of
Okay.
people don't know, but it's just my understanding. But
Okay. Good to
yeah,
know.
so Tamazight you see like
Tamas.
on a lot of boards. It's there are a lot of like signs on the street. You see like Arabic, maybe like they're either bi or trilingual with some combination of definitely Arabic and then maybe also French and Tamazight. Um, Definitely Tamazight to a lesser extent. Like it's not on every sign, it's not everywhere, and it almost feels a little bit like ceremonial. I don't know if that's the right word, at least in Rabat, because like everyone speaks obviously Arabic or French, but kind of just to like give it some of that recognition. But I think if you go to if you're in more villages outside of the city, then I think there are a lot of places that still speak Tamazight, and that's the like native language of that area.
Yeah, you might have to go a bit more rural to have that experience, which makes sense
Exactly.
to an extent. I think that often happens in major cities.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow.
And
Wow.
then
Wow.
the Spanish influence is especially in the north, like next to the Spanish border.
Right. Yeah. Because you've got, what is it?
Hmm.
Gibraltar, which is kind of, is it Gibraltar?
Yeah.
See, my
Yeah,
geography
the like
is a
straight. No,
little.
no, that sounds right. The Strait of
It sounds right
Gibraltar.
to me, but it might be
Yeah.
wrong.
Yeah. No,
Okay.
I think that's right.
All right. It's definitely that area of the world, there's a lot of stuff
Yeah.
going on there.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, I've got
Mhm.
so many things I want to ask you about. I don't know where to start. I mean, since we were talking a little bit about English and kind of like
Mhm.
having pretending we're not English speakers to kind of
Uh-huh.
um get the opportunity to speak languages. I mean,
Right.
do you want to talk a little bit about? I'd be interested to know what your kind of perspective is on kind of being an English native speaker. Obviously, there are a lot of kind of privileges and advantages which come with it, but also there are some inconveniences. Like, what's been your experience learning other languages? Like, have you found it useful, or have you found it to be a hindrance in some respects? I mean, I want to
Mhm.
really keep the question broad because I don't want to lead you either way. I really
Yeah.
want to know what you think.
Yeah. It's a big
Big
question.
question, very big question.
Yeah. The mindset that I've sort of developed is that, you know, as native English speakers, the entire world is learning my native language, our native language. And when I think about the effort that I put into learning a language, the hours of my time, the often like money for courses and books, the like courage or embarrassment it takes to practice, right? When I think of all that stuff that I put into learning a language, and then I think like, and oftentimes I'm rewarded very like heavily for that. Like when I speak just a little bit of Arabic, people are like, "Oh my God, like mashallah, you speak Arabic so well." And especially with Arabic and Bengali, I get those reactions. Um, and even after like a few words, right? And
Yeah.
maybe for a language like I have a feeling this is a little bit different with French. Maybe for German, it takes a longer conversation. But at the end of a longer conversation, oftentimes people will tell me, "Oh, like you actually speak German pretty well." Um, Whereas because I also like I started Arabic because I started teaching English. So I've worked quite a bit with, and I also like work on italki. So I've worked quite a bit with people learning English, and I just noticed that it's not nearly the same reaction. It's when people are learning English, instead of saying, "Wow, like two words," it's like, you used the wrong preposition, you know? And I just feel really, I don't know, kind of uncomfortable about that I can put so much effort into a language, like that the whole world puts this effort into learning my language, and it's seen as an expectation, and not as something to be like commended. Um, so I say all this as the background of like my philosophy that I think as native English speakers, um, we need to put more work into that international communication. And so, even if English is still the easiest language to communicate in, when you're speaking with like people from abroad, that it's not just because even if English is still the easiest language, if you have put in some effort to learn their language, like even just a little bit, you're showing them, like I'm going to put myself out there. I'm going to maybe make this mistake in front of you instead of just this assumption of, oh, you just learned English and then speak that with me. So, this is maybe a little bit off topic of your question, but
No, that's good.
that's sort of this
That's
is sort of
always
what
the
I think like.
best conversations are that way, when you digress and
Yeah,
digress and digress and find yourself somewhere where you did not expect you to
exactly.
be. I love those conversations.
Exactly. So I think as a native English speaker, I think that we need to put, because the world, I mean, when you talk to people in other languages, you see that this is what they think. They think that English speakers are kind of these like maybe a little bit entitled and not so smart people who can't learn other languages.
Yeah, well, I mean,
Um,
they're so surprised when we can like say hello, how are you? It's kind of, maybe
exactly.
that doesn't bode well for us. It's kind of like,
Right.
yeah, yeah.
Exactly. So I think we have some responsibility. The fact that everyone learns our native language, that we have some responsibility to put some effort into that communication, and also to like encourage people who are learning English. Like when they make a mistake or when they just try to talk to you in English, be like, eh, be supporting them of like, wow, I see your English is really good, or it's
Like they are
improved from
to
the last
us.
time I spoke to you. Exactly.
Yeah,
And I mean, sometimes it's a little bit extreme. Like they'll be like, people will tell me, "Oh my God, you speak Bengali better than I do." I'm
yeah.
like, well, that's not true. So
That's
you don't have to say that, but just offer them this encouragement and like that they're also undertaking this like difficult project.
yeah. I think this is probably good for me to be hearing as well, because even though I'm like aware of it enough to ask the question, it's just kind of like hearing it from someone else, and I
Hmm.
don't know, it kind of reinforces the idea, because now I'm thinking
Yeah.
about the exchanges I have with people, and it's like,
Right.
I mean, you don't see many YouTube video. You see a lot of YouTube videos titled "White Guy Shocks Such and Such with
Right.
Amazing Oral Skills" or whatever, and they're like
Yeah.
really provocatively titled, but at the same
Yeah.
time, the reactions in the videos are really like
Are so
strong.
positive.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but you don't see that much you don't see that the other way around. And I suppose that's at the crux of the
Exactly.
problem. It's like
Hmm.
so many people put so much effort into learning English, and
Yeah.
they maybe they don't get the same kind of reward. I
Yeah.
mean,
And you can even extend that to knowing English and also into bilingualism and multilingualism, where, when an American speaks multiple languages, it's like this amazing thing. Whereas here in Morocco, honestly, this is I would say almost like a little culture shock to me. Of in the US, when I like am talking about the languages I speak, people are like amazed. And here, speaking 3 to 4 languages fluently is like no big deal. Like, I would say everyone who I interact with on a day-to-day basis speaks at least 2 languages fluently, probably 3, maybe even 4, or another fourth to like a intermediate level.
yeah, yeah. I think that's also so the thing is, we're kind of talking about uh Arabic Africa, but then also I think it's a very African thing to speak so many languages, because you go a little bit. I was reading, I don't know where I was reading this, but I think it was some book I've read about language learning. I was reading
Mhm.
about one like African village's linguistic upbringing, and how he like learned a language in his town, but then he like liked a
Yeah.
girl from the town over, so he had to learn her language. And then at primary
Right.
school, he had to learn another language, and then high school, another language. And then he
Mhm.
starts learning the lingua franca of the entire region, and then you have English.
Right.
So by the time you're like mid-teens, or you've got all of these languages. So it's like also a
Exactly.
big product of the environment.
Yeah.
So I mean, to be to maybe cut the English speakers a little bit of slack, it's like there is also,
Yeah.
the environment isn't conducive to it. And the way I
Definitely.
kind of think about it is, all of the pressures which are pushing people, or maybe dragging people to learn English, are the same pressures which are kind of conducive to English speakers not being
Mhm.
exposed to other languages.
Yeah, that's very
not
true.
really an excuse, but at the same time, it's maybe an explanation.
No, that's definitely true. Yeah.
Complicated,
Yeah, which is
complicated
why,
world.
right. Yeah. Which is why I feel like we maybe have to, right, like other people might sort of come to this multilingualism and high level of English, without trying. Whereas as native English speakers, to get to that level, we have to almost consciously decide that we want to put this effort in. Which is that's what I guess that's sort of what I was saying, it's like I think we need to consciously make that decision as the majority. I think, I just think it means more than you realize. Um,
It's almost, I almost think of it as a sign of respect. If you just, even if you learn a
exactly,
little bit when you're going to the country, maybe you don't
exactly.
have enough time to learn the language, but you're going
Right,
to another
exactly.
country, learn how to say hello, thank you, a few basic things, and it's just it. I mean, there's the respect aspect, but also it's so worth it, because you go there and you get this.
Yeah,
When you speak to someone in their language, first of all, you get the
right.
maybe the initial shock, but then you get the warmness which follows, which is really, really
Yeah,
nice.
exactly.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
I think we're pretty much on the same page with that one, honestly. It's an interesting
Yeah,
topic, but
it
it's
is.
yeah,
Just
that's the
just
world we live
actually
in.
one thing that I've been really, enjoying about Morocco is I feel like it's a very, I don't know what the right word is, like, international environment, or at least, an environment that's very aware of other cultures and cultural differences. And I think maybe that has something to do with the fact that Morocco is itself a big mix of, all these cultures. The native people, Arab culture, which at some point was the Arab was the, what's the word? Like the dominant, like
Oh,
imperial culture almost. And
yeah.
then after that, the French come in, right? So like Morocco
Yeah.
has had a lot of experience with like
Yeah.
imperialism, and is now this like mix, I would say, which I think just makes people very, very aware of this mindset. Like honestly, I've talked about like Jordan and India because those are the other two countries I have traveled in or know a little bit about. And obviously, not that they're not aware of imperialism. Obviously, they are, but I just feel like it comes up much more here. The way people talk about things, I can tell that they're aware of it. I can tell that they're very aware of their position in the world. Um, as as having this less powerful passport, while being right next to Europe, right? Like they're
Yeah, that's
so,
rough.
it's interesting here, yeah. And but I the thing I like about it is that as a person who's like I can learn Arabic and like live in Jordan or something, but I'm never gonna be like, okay, like Jordanian culture is just like me and this is like where I want to go. It's like who I am. I'm a very like international person. I like using multiple languages, not just one. So although I like to dive deep into one culture, there's always going to be a part of me that is a mix of lots of different places. And I feel like that sort of fits in really well in the like Moroccan environment, or at least this is my just how I feel so far.
That's really interesting. Do you think that's something, is that a feeling which you had before you even went to other places? Or is it something that grew or kind of came out of going to, you said India, you said Jordan, now Morocco.
Mhm.
Are those the places you've been, or have you been to maybe other places as well?
Um, those are I've been to some other places. Those are the places that I would say have the biggest impact on me, and it's mostly through their languages that these are the languages I've started to learn, and then um, that have really become a like important part of my life. So like I'm also learning some Spanish, but that's more for like practical reasons. I have some friends who speak it. So while obviously I enjoy speaking Spanish, it's
Spanish is
not.
big in the United States from what I'm aware of.
Yes, it
It's
is.
actually
So
surprising. You
yeah,
think United States, you think English, but then when you actually look at the United States, you go, "Oh wow, there's a big
exactly.
Hispanic community. There's a lot of Spanish going on."
Exactly.
Obviously,
So
you
that's
know better than
more.
me.
Yeah, no, but exactly. That's more like why I'm learning some Spanish, but I wouldn't call it as much like part of my identity. Um, Whereas with these other languages, I think just who I like through learning languages, like this multiculturalism, being around people who are also interested in learning languages or who speak multiple ones, or other people who sort of have their feet in different cultures all at once. That's what I relate to the most, more than like someone who just grew up and has lived in one country for their whole life. So it's funny. I mean, like, yes, I grew up in the US, like basically my entire life. But even like throughout high school, like most of my friends were like the international students, and like
Yeah,
um, those are just
right.
the people who I relate to the most, I would say.
Yeah, whenever there was an international student at my school, I was making friends with them. That's me as
Exactly.
well, totally. Right. And
Yeah.
I mean, hmm, I gotta. We'll get to both of these questions. My first question, I wanna hear more about
Mhm.
your experiences being when you say India. Where in India?
So I'm learning Bengali, so that is West
Just yeah.
Bengal,
Okay. Okay.
so sort of Eastern India, and also Bangladesh is part of that same region. But yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Um. Right. So I want to hear more about your experiences in Jordan and then in India, and then also I at some point I know I've seen on your Instagram that you had an
Hmm.
exchange sister
Yeah.
with you for a long time in the States. I want to hear about all of this, but maybe first we can start by I'd love to hear about your experiences being overseas in those other places. Like,
Mm.
did those, like, what was the first one you did? How did that affect you? What was the
Uh-huh.
language
Yeah.
like over there?
Uh-huh. Okay, so the first place I went that wasn't like Germany, like wasn't like another Western country, was India. So Yeah, I went there for about a month, and actually I spent most of that time in Delhi and Mumbai, so not Bengali area, just because I had like family and friends who I could stay with in those places. So I actually got 3 days in Kolkata where they speak Bengali. So I've spent a
Okay.
total of 3 days in a Bengali speaking region. But
That the amazing thing is though, like even if it's such a short period of time, it can do so much.
mhm,
I
yeah.
mean, yeah. Yeah, go on.
Yeah, for sure. So like India was a really interesting experience. I really like fell in love with it was funny because like before I've been learning Bengali already and like everyone knew okay, I really into Bengali. I love South Asian food, everything. And then people would ask me, "What if you go to India and like you don't like it?" And I was like, I don't know, I'm not worried about that. And yeah, I didn't have anything to worry about because I was there and I really loved it. And it's I don't really know how to explain why. I just like
It's just
something
something.
just clicked. Yeah, exactly. Um, and it's interesting. You were talking about how that maybe later affected later experiences, which India is definitely maybe not as clean in the big cities, not as and being the first like not Western country I went to, that's how I pictured more of like the non-European American world. So when I went to Jordan, actually, I was like surprised by how clean everything was. Like, still the roads are a little chaotic, but not to the same degree.
Right?
um, so that actually surprised me in Jordan. Then I realized, okay, this changes more like country to country.
Yeah, so you have
Um,
the first experience, you kind of go, you kind of get an approximation of maybe some other
right.
places in the world. Then you go to another
Yeah.
place, you have to recalibrate. You're like, oh, they're not
Yeah.
all like that.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly. Because like you don't know what you don't know, right? So it's like
exactly.
I wasn't consciously making that assumption, but when I went to Jordan, I realized, oh, I had this assumption. Um,
Yeah, that's the
yeah,
thing. Yeah, that's the thing. You can't constantly consciously filter every single perception of a place that you're getting. There are some
right.
impressions you get which you don't realize you get. And then
Yeah,
when they're challenged by some new information, that's when you realize, oh, wow, I was thinking
right.
that. I didn't realize I was thinking that. Yep.
Exactly. So like I've also had people here ask me like, what do you think of Morocco? Like, do you think it's like a dirty? And I'm like no, honestly, like it's I mean, maybe this is also like the area that I'm in Rabat, but like it's beautiful. I don't feel like it's dirty at all, especially if you compare it to like somewhere like New York. It's probably cleaner, honestly, where I am.
What's the climate like? I mean,
Right now
maybe.
it's winter. Actually, that sort of surprised. I mean, I knew it was going to be cold, but I definitely should have brought more sweaters.
Yeah, I think Morocco, I think
um,
hot. I don't know why.
yeah,
Is
which I
that.
think in the summer it is hot, but like it's the winter right now, so it's my Americanness. It's about like in the 60s Fahrenheit.
Wow, this means nothing to
Um,
me. I reckon that's probably
uh,
sub 20. I'll quickly do a conversion.
okay.
60s Fahrenheit. Wow, I
I
have
really
no
need to
idea.
learn. I really need to learn more Celsius.
Okay, it's 15 points. Well, 60 degrees Fahrenheit is 15.6 degrees Celsius.
Okay, so it's usually a bit warmer than that, a bit warmer than 60.
Right, so kind of sub 20s. Well,
Yeah,
not sub,
exactly.
not below zero.
Yeah,
Okay. Okay.
yeah.
Okay. Okay.
I mean, it's like I have to wear a sweater and I'm good.
Right. Okay.
Mhm.
Okay.
Which is funny because then like everyone else is in their like winter coats. I'm like, this is not winter coat
This
weather.
is, yeah. That's kind of like, yeah, that's not that cold.
No.
Yeah. Melbourne,
Yeah.
where I live, can get Melbourne, where I live, like that's probably also kind of representative of winter. We can
Mhm.
get we can get colder, but like normally we just end up right. It's just unpleasant in winter. It's like rainy winter and
Yeah.
not cold, but like yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, and then
Uh,
how did you end up having an exchange partner coming over and
mm.
living with you for how long was it?
For a
Months,
year.
a year, a
Like 9
whole
months.
year.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
So, like I kind of mentioned, I was friends with quite a few exchange students in high school, especially during my junior year, so my third year. And
Yeah, I'm glad you gave me the
I,
translation of that.
yeah, my American ness, but yeah, I had always wanted to do some sort of exchange in high school, and somehow the time went by, and it was never exactly the right time. There was always some class I had to take, or I
Yeah.
was doing dance too, so it never worked out. But after like becoming friends with a few exchange students, I was like, why don't we host one? And my mom is very much like me. Like I mentioned, she like studied Russian, so she's very into other cultures and languages, and hosting exchange students is totally something she would do. So we convinced the rest of my family, and yeah, and I knew I wanted, like, I'm learning all these languages. Bengali is still the one, like I was sort of mentioning about India. Like Bengali is still sort of probably the most important one to me.
It's here.
Yeah, it's the one right here,
Yeah.
exactly. So,
Oh, for the
um,
people listening, that's
so
in the chest, right where the heart is. That's where it is.
yes,
It's the one close to the heart.
yes. So, I knew hosting exchange student. Obviously, I don't want to like be taking advantage of them or something, but it was a good opportunity to practice a language, right? So I did want to like have someone who spoke Bengali, and
You always call it
yeah. So
Bangla.
oh,
Is that the
Bangla, yeah,
endonym of Bangla?
exactly. Bangla is the endonym. Bengali is like the exonym. So
Okay, got it.
depending on who I'm
Bangla.
speaking to, I use
Yeah,
both.
yeah, it makes sense. You're talking to me,
Yeah, yeah,
probably
exactly.
Bengali. Yeah, I gotcha, I
Yeah.
gotcha.
Um. So yeah. So then we like signed up. There was some exchange students coming from Bangladesh, and yeah, we hosted her for a year.
That would have been so amazing. I
Yeah.
mean,
I mean, it was amazing. Like we're still really close. She went back probably like 6 months ago, but we still talk all the time. And yeah,
how often were you speaking? Like you already said, you didn't want to like take advantage and
yeah.
speak in Bengali all the time, but how much? Obviously, you're going to speak a little
Um,
bit at least.
yeah. So this is the point where actually English imperialism almost worked to my advantage, in the fact that South Asians, especially from like a middle to upper class, speak perfect fluent English. I mean, I mean, she is like I would call her like a native English speaker. She speaks English to that level.
Right,
Um,
right.
so, she was coming to the whereas probably a
So you
lot of
didn't feel
exchange
bad,
students,
you're not taking
right,
away
like
the
probably a lot of
opportunity.
exchange students are exactly coming to the US to practice English, whereas she did not need to practice English. So, and actually it worked out really, really well in that she was almost, I think, excited for like the opportunity to still get to
Ah,
speak her like
yeah,
mother
yeah, yeah.
language even while being here. And she was, I honestly, I couldn't have asked for anyone better, because like we would sometimes do these like little classes. I would like, and she's not a language teacher, so I would just ask her a lot of questions to sort of figure out the thing I was looking for.
Yeah, because
um
that's the other thing, which I know you have your little
yeah.
WordPress blog where you were doing like
Mhm.
Bengali grammar posts and things, but
Yeah.
the resources for the language aren't very big, are they?
Yeah, the
Because
resources are not so developed.
yeah,
Actually,
because
this is something, yeah.
in your bio, one of the first things is less commonly studied languages. So obviously that's a big
Mhm.
theme in your language learning journey.
Yeah.
So I'd love to hear about that as well. I
Yeah, for
still want to hear
sure.
more about having the exchange partner, but you
No,
can
yes.
tell I want to hear about a lot
Okay.
of things. I'm very interested.
Yes. So yeah, resources for Bengali are definitely lacking. But she was actually really good at, and she was good at actually switching the conversation back to Bengali, whereas sometimes it's like if you don't know something and you have to switch it to English, then the other person is going to stay in English.
That happens
Whereas
all the
she knew
time.
I was learning, I know, all the time. And she was so good at starting conversations with me in Bengali, switching the language back even after I'd switched it to English,
That's so
and
nice.
not switching it herself, which is pretty, honestly, I haven't met very many people like that.
Yeah.
Um, and also it was a great opportunity, I mean, to learn, because that was sort of my problem after having taken a Bengali class for 2 years that was very focused on like reading and writing. Um, I felt so lost in a conversation, even after 2 years. I didn't know how to speak. And luckily that lined up perfectly with when she was coming. So this point where I'm like so lost, I don't know how to have a conversation. And then she comes, and then we can have conversations all the time. So it was a great opportunity to learn more colloquial language, slang, and also just how to like have a conversation. Um,
How long when you did 2 years of classes, you were doing a lot of
mhm.
classes, right? Like frequently.
It was like a university course, so it was like 4 days a week, so like 4 hours a week.
Right, okay. Okay.
Hmm.
So it's not necessarily a huge amount, but that's still like if you're doing it consistently over the course of a couple of years, that time adds up.
Right, exactly. And I mean, if you think at the level that people probably usually are after like second year Spanish or something at a university, I feel like it's probably a little bit higher. I mean, sure, Spanish is more related to English, but also I think that the programs are just more developed. They teach you more effectively. I felt like the program I was in was maybe not the most effective.
That's very
Um,
interesting.
yeah, and by second year, first year there
Why?
was a few other. Um, I think because my experiences, like with Arabic too, is that the professors are very knowledgeable about how to teach the language. Like they actually have like degrees in like Arabic linguistics, for example.
Right.
Whereas with Bengali, it's like just this a native speaker who doesn't necessarily know how to teach the language. And I mean, also there's a lack of resources. So if you're going to teach it well, you probably have to create a lot of your own resources. Um,
Right.
and also, although what I actually my first year class was pretty good. My first year class, I felt like I learned a lot. But by second year, I was actually the only non-Bengali person in the classroom. Because it was a class of about like by second first year was maybe 10 people, second year was like 4 or 5, who were all heritage speakers other than me. So once we're really getting into that more like nitty gritty of the grammar and you have to explain it a little more than first year, I think the professor didn't really have much experience teaching someone who didn't already kind of get it as a heritage language. Like someone who's just like, I have no idea what you're talking about. um, so yeah.
I think I read somewhere, I don't know where it was, on something you posted, you also said, and this is maybe where that comes from, that
Mhm,
you try to also spend some time with teachers who aren't native speakers. Is
mhm.
that the reason why?
Exactly. Yeah, that experience is sort of what led me to. And I would say it depends. Like if you have a native speaker teacher who's really good at anticipating your needs and your struggles, then that's great. But I think sometimes non-native teachers can be useful in they I mean they went through what you're going through. So they know exactly how to explain it to you. So actually I do like online Bengali lessons right now and my teacher is an Australian who's lived in
Let's
India for the last
go.
10 years.
Let's go.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Right. Well,
But actually, you were mentioning like resources and stuff. I'm actually working on this big Bengali resource project right now. So
ooh,
I don't know when this episode is going to come out, but
I
I
wish
think
I
my
had a
project
bigger
will.
I wish I had a bigger audience to help you promote this. I'll post
That's all
something on
right.
Instagram as well. I've got more
Oh,
people
thank
there
you.
too.
Yeah. I think probably I'm gonna try to do it in the next like week or two, like around New Year's. Um, but yeah.
Can you tell me more? Is it going to like spoil the
Yes. No,
announcement?
no, no.
All right.
So it's basically a website where I'm trying to sort of exactly what I've been saying, where I've noticed there's a lot of native speakers who want to help. There's quite a few YouTube channels, but they sort of focus on the same things over and over again of like survival vocab and
It's
like
always the beginner level. It's always
yeah,
the beginner level.
exactly. So that's sort of my point. One of my like goals with the website is to increase resources for like intermediate and advanced levels, increase resources for things more than just vocab lists. So like actually, we're making some lessons around like song lyrics, around video clips, um, that kind of thing.
Who's
And one
we?
of the main, so okay, yeah, so like I was saying, like obviously I don't have the native speaker knowledge to just create all these resources. So it's like a collaboration between me and hopefully in the future other Bengali learners and native speakers. So I'm working with like quite a few native speakers right now to help me like write out like the whole transcription of what they say in a video clip. And then I'm putting that onto the video
Mm.
as like subtitles. And then I'm also working to, you know, if you have a lesson based around this video clip, explain some of the grammar points. And then I'm checking with native speakers to make sure, okay, all these explanations are correct. And like, oh, here's this thing I didn't really understand. Can you help me explain this? Um, so working with native speakers to basically, I feel like as a language learner, I have some knowledge about what resources are valuable and what learners need to know. So using that knowledge and then combining it with native speakers' actual knowledge of the language and culture to create like effective resources.
You see, I I I think we see that a lot in a lot of effective resources. You've got a collaboration between people who
Hmm.
bring different experience and skill sets to the table.
Yeah.
This sounds very exciting. It's
And then
obviously a
also
lot
I'm
of
trying
work
to,
as well, I
yeah,
imagine.
it's a bit of work.
So you're just going to offer everything for free, or are you? What's the plan?
Yeah, so there's a few Bengali things you can buy, but I really, because the thing that prompted me to do this was in German. If I want to know how to make conditional sentences, I just look up conditional sentences in German, and then I get like 5 blogs that explain it to me with examples,
And
sometimes
10 YouTube
audio.
videos.
Exactly. So that's exactly what I want. Is I want to have something where you can look up, you know, Bengali conditional sentences and get a blog post with examples, hopefully audio, explaining how to say conditional sentences in Bengali. So I forgot why I started saying that, but you basically, so yeah, it's gonna be free. I
Okay.
do have like I set up like a Patreon thing basically, so if people do want to like support it, hopefully like long-term goals, I'm like maybe I can pay people to help contribute something or set up um set up like new projects and stuff like a podcast. Maybe that'd be awesome, but that's like
That'd
long
be
term.
sick. Yeah. That's
Yeah,
okay. Okay. I'm
exactly.
right. So you're like,
And then
right.
also, like, I have a little page sort of linking to all the resources I know because learning like Bengali on Instagram, I get a lot of DMs of like, what do you recommend for resources? So I'm gonna like make this whole like, I mean, as comprehensive as possible list of different kinds of like YouTube channels, textbooks, everything. Um, and then also
Fantastic.
Bangla, yeah, Bangla is a language with lots of, it's basically a dialect continuum. So there's lots of like different accents, dialects, and even dialects which go into being actually separate languages. And I mean, for anything that's not standard Bangla, like there's no resources, right? So
Wow.
um, I'm a
That's
little
hard.
less equipped to like work on that, but I'm also sort of saying with the people I'm working with, you know, if you speak one of these other dialects and stuff, I'm happy to work with you to create similar things to, you know, maybe create like short stories
Oh,
or like
I'm excited
audios
about
that
this
people can
project for you.
listen to.
I'll tell
Thank
you
you.
what,
Yeah, I'm very excited about it.
for the people listening who are interested by this, I'll make sure that there's a link to your blog and Instagram in the podcast description. But
That sounds
also,
good.
like, they'll definitely be able to get to it from your Instagram. From what I'm hearing, they'll find
Mhm.
a way, a link in your bio or
Yes.
something. But also, maybe if this podcast comes out about the right time, I can maybe put a direct link as well. But I'll make sure
Yeah,
there's
that'd
at
be
least
great.
something in the podcast
Thank
description for
you.
people to come and find
Yes,
you
thank
and
you.
find their way there. No, but I mean, this is a thing. Like, I'm gonna go and grab a little book. I'm gonna be back in 2 seconds.
Okay. Sounds good.
So this is the kind of thing we're talking about, right? This is the advantage of studying a more commonly studied language. You see these? These here are short Chinese graded readers. I think they're probably 500 to 1,000 words long max, probably even more towards the 500 word end. But they use a core set of 150 characters. They use more, but the ones which they use, which are outside of that level, first of all, they have a glossary of them, so I don't even need to look them up. I just look at them in the book. And then second of all, those characters, the vast majority of them come from a core set of 300 characters, which are from the next level in the series. So you build as you go. So the advantage of studying Mandarin Chinese, which is a more commonly studied language, is I can go and buy these and I can start doing extensive reading when I only know 150 characters. So
good luck finding that for Bengali.
that's why I'm really excited to hear about what you're doing, because if you can, I mean, obviously this is next level stuff. This is beyond like just creating the basic resources, which even it's sounding like Bengali is even lacking. But just, I think I don't know how to say it. I think it's a really fantastic project. I think that could help so many people.
Yeah.
I think that's great.
Yeah, I try to have like these like vocab lists in the beginning of some of the posts that cover like the vocab that's not just like the super basic stuff. So hopefully like, you can like learn some of that vocab and then go on to like the lesson around the video clip or something.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
But that was actually making me think about because I was thinking about Bengali, and I don't know what it's like with Chinese or Mandarin. Like when there's like this as any of the languages that you're learning, there's like large disparity between the language that you'll see like written and in books and what's actually spoken.
Oh, sorry, was that a question?
I'm asking you. Like,
sorry.
Do you have like experience like because that's been another really interesting thing with like quite a few of the languages I'm learning have this like large disparity.
Oh, so have I experienced that in the languages I've learned?
Yeah.
Okay. Probably, maybe not to the same extent. Well, here's the thing. I don't know what your experience has been like, but certainly, for example, with French. Here's the thing. I'm gonna take this thought to its full extent because it will explain itself. But with French, for example, as with every language, but with French, for example, you have different registers of language. You have very casual, what they call familiar language, and then you have kind of standard language, which is kind of what you'd use in everyday conversations, but not with family or friends. It would just be maybe like a store clerk or something. And then you have the upper register, which is formal language, which you might use for formal occasions and in speeches and things like that. So obviously you're not going to be picking up on the slang as much when you're reading books and things. However, the resources do exist to then go and learn by consuming content or reading the familiar register. For example, all I have to do is go and watch a series on Netflix or go and watch my favorite YouTubers or listen to podcasts, which are using that register. All of a sudden, I've been exposed to that language, that casual language. So there is a big disparity between standard textbooks and the language which is spoken, but you can still learn the language which is spoken.
Right.
The resources exist.
That's it. Yeah, for sure. It's interesting with, I would say, Bengali and Darija, that the sort of most casual register, depending on like class and where you are and everything, is going to incorporate another language. So with Bangla, to speak casually, you throw in tons of English. And those high registers are those registers that use lots of like Sanskritic words that actually no one uses in their everyday life, right? Because in everyday life, everyone uses the English word. And then you can get that's like more like casual speech, right? And like Darija sort of, I mean, like I said, it depends like class and everything, but it's like just throwing in French.
Yeah.
Um, like
This
you can
is
say almost any word you want in Darija in French, and like it's fine.
that's funny.
Yeah.
That I've something which I quipped I think on Twitter one time was a big part of sounding more like a French native is knowing when to not use French and instead when to use English. So the
Exactly.
same thing happens there a little bit. Like there are
Yeah.
some occasions where you don't speak French or you don't speak
Hmm.
Darija, you speak some other language, and that's what is.
Exactly.
But you're never going to be taught that in a textbook, are you?
Right. Yeah, exactly. But that's what really makes you sound natural.
Yeah. So
Hmm.
what advice would you have for someone who's wanting to, well, first of all, what advice would you have for someone in general who's wanting to study languages which have less resources and are less commonly studied? But then also, what advice would you have for people who want to study the languages which don't have many resources, which you've studied and you've got personal
Okay.
experience with?
So just in general, um, I would say for me, it's been a lot easier to learn like less commonly learned languages as someone who already has experience with language learning. So I don't necessarily want to tell you, oh, go learn French first or go learn German and then learn this language. But I'm just saying, if you have a background in language learning and you have an idea of how to learn a language, that will that's probably the most helpful resource you can have. Because you can take these like bad resources and pull out what you need. Um,
Ah, I
and
see.
like also like for example, like when I'm learning a new language, like some of the first things, because I have a very like communicative approach, I like to speak right away. So I know the kind of vocab that I need for speaking. I know that before I know 50 fruit names, I need to know how to use two verbs together in the same sentence, right? And like some of those verbs, like how to say, I want to, I need to, I can. If I know those three, I know some basic verbs about like speak, work, etc. Like I can introduce myself, have a little bit of a conversation, right? Um, so I would say knowing what you need to know. And even if you haven't learned another language, I think you can figure that out by figuring out, maybe even take note of the kinds of sentences you say a lot in English. Um, like other kinds of words that I feel like are useful are like always, sometimes, never. Um, so
Yeah.
if you build up some of like just knowing what you need to know, that's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, I know what you
Um,
mean. Like self-introduction, the 20 most common
yeah.
verbs which always come up.
Hmm.
Um, a few
Yeah.
conjunctions like and,
Yeah.
th- as a
And
result,
but
but,
exactly.
and then
Because
because, and then once you know those things, you know the a few nouns which are relevant to the things which you're always going to, like at the
right.
beginning of talking to someone in the language, you're always going to introduce yourself, like what's your name, how old you are.
Yeah.
And then also there's going to be the question, how have you learned this language? How come you speak
Right.
this
So
language? So you
should
want to
know how
know
to
how to
answer
say
that.
that. And then
Exactly.
all of a sudden you've made it through a 3-minute conversation.
Right,
Yeah,
exactly.
I gotcha.
And
I
then
gotcha.
in terms of getting to more of like an intermediate level, I would still say it's a similar thing with, like, for example, what I was saying with my exchange sister is she didn't know how to teach me. And I couldn't ask her, like, how do you say a conditional sentence in Bengali? Like, doesn't know what that means, right? I
Mm.
feel, and I think language learners do this quite a bit. And then the native speakers are just like, well, what are you asking me?
So you have to
Um,
tease it out. You have to,
exactly.
yeah.
So I would lots of examples. So if you have a like native
Wait, hold
speaker
on.
who
The
you can work
internet
with,
cut again.
even if they're not cut out.
Immediately, yeah, immediately
So
after I
yeah,
said
if
tease it
you
out.
okay, so if you have like a native speaker you can work with um, who doesn't necessarily know how to teach a language, if you can ask them lots of examples that will pull out what you want. So if you want to learn the conditional, ask them how to say this conditional sentence in the language, and then they'll give you the translation. And then maybe there's some word in that translation where you're like, that doesn't quite make sense to me. So you could ask them like, "Oh, could you make another sentence with this word?" Or you could also like frame your own sentence and then see if they use that word in the next translation they give you. And maybe if they do, it's going to confirm like what you thought. And if they
Wow.
don't, then you're like, oh, well, let me like tease out this other thing. So,
I've had to
yeah.
I've had to do that. Sorry, I haven't had to do that. I have done this, but I've never
Mhm,
had to do it out of
mhm.
necessity. Like I could always look it up.
I see.
That's very
Yeah.
interesting. But in the
Uh-huh.
moment, sometimes you want to know something right then and there. You
Right,
haven't got a
exactly.
resource with you, so you're trying to tease it out.
Mhm.
But I've never had to do
Exactly.
it wow, that's interesting.
Yeah.
That's just
So
this is gonna be I'm gonna come when I start learning a less common language, I'm gonna come back and I'm gonna listen to this podcast episode.
awesome.
This is gonna be useful for me.
Yeah. Yeah. And then it's hard to say. Some languages there really are not resources.
How do you
Some,
find resources? Like, given
yeah,
there aren't
that's a
many
good
resources,
question.
how do you find them?
Some there are more than you think. There's often textbooks, so even if that's not your favorite way to learn, but I kind of like textbooks, but even if you don't, like if they're the only resource, like they're going to give you some valuable information in terms of like grammar and vocab. So I mean, if you go on Amazon and you look up like a book for it, like you, depending on the language, you might be able to find something.
What about libraries?
um that's a good question. I haven't looked at libraries like exclusively to find like my first resources, but I do know that the library from my city, like they had a section, they had some Bengali books, they had some Arabic books, and they did also have they did have a textbook for like learning Bengali. So you can definitely go and check.
Right.
Um
But then there's
I will
also,
say
of
it's
course, the internet.
probably, yeah. Like Bengali, maybe you can find a textbook. Like anything more than that, like anything more unusual than that is probably going to be kind of difficult. Like for like Bengali is
Wow.
like actually the second most spoken language in India. So
It's
if you're
it's
then
in
going to,
it's like in the top 10 most spoken languages in the
exactly,
world.
exactly.
It's actually insane to think there aren't
Right,
resources.
exactly.
I've got a book
Which is
somewhere.
why.
Um, it's
Mhm.
called Babel, and it talks about the
Oh,
top
I have
10,
that
top
book.
20 most spoken languages in the world, and Bengali is
Yeah,
like in the top 10.
Bengali's on there. Yeah,
Is it in like the
exactly.
top 5? Maybe not.
It's like
Oh,
7
here
or
it is.
8 usually.
Here it is. Okay,
Yeah,
let's have a
I think
look.
it should be like 7 or 8.
It's sort of in it's number 6, but
Oh, okay.
he like he
You put
said,
like Chinese like
Hindi and
together.
Urdu are the same language. That's in this
Yeah.
book at least. It's like a conglomerate, and
Yeah.
yeah, he merged a few. So, but it's definitely in the
Yeah.
top 10. There you go.
Yeah.
So we're talking about a
Exactly.
language in the top 10 most spoken languages in the world. It's a bit of
Exactly.
a wake up call.
So right. So that's why I think you can maybe find one textbook at a library. But then when you try to do something maybe a little bit not in the top 10 or 20, like some other language like Malayalam or something from India, then it gets a little bit harder.
I haven't heard of it.
Um,
Okay.
it's just like another Indian
Yeah.
language. But yeah, so look, you can check your library. If not, you can check online. Also, like look on Instagram. There's often quite a few like Instagram. Oh, I think it's frozen.
You are frozen, but I'm hearing you.
Okay.
Ah,
Oh,
it's
okay.
my internet connection. It said my internet connection is
Oh,
unstable.
interesting.
Okay.
um,
Instagram.
Look on
Okay.
Instagram because there's quite, especially I've been noticing recently. There's been a lot of new like words in etc. for all these different like Bengali dialects. Um, so if you can find a page like that, that's a partly for vocab, although sometimes the vocab that they use is very like high register and stuff.
Right.
But it is a good place to start to like maybe finding native speakers to like chat with, or usually the kind of people who are going to be like running a language Instagram account about their language are the kind of people who are going to be very open to you if you like, hey, could I ask you this question? Um, so I think having like native speakers who you can ask questions to is very valuable. Also, italki, like you can, especially for some languages like that are not common, you can find a teacher for like $5 an hour, honestly, and just practice your conversation, ask them all these questions, like I'm saying, to coax the answers out of them. Um,
What about language
yeah,
exchange apps? Well, like here's the thing with Bengali, for example, there aren't many resources, but there are many speakers.
right.
So maybe this isn't representative of every language which doesn't have many resources, but in that case, you can probably still find language exchange partners, right?
For sure. Yeah. I honestly haven't tried like language exchange apps so much. Just because like I kind of have like different friends and I use like Instagram more. But definitely that's like a thing you can do, especially if your language has quite a few speakers. And you might also consider because for some languages, for example, especially like native languages from, you know, some rural area, they like sometimes on those apps they have a list of languages and that your language you're learning might not even be on that list, in which case native speakers aren't going to list it as like on those apps like, oh, as I speak this language, right?
Because they can't, right?
So
So they'll
exactly.
put something which is maybe like
So
an
you can like maybe
approximation.
look for like, right, like what is the like lingua franca of that area. So I don't know the names of any like specific like African languages or something, but like if you have some language that's in like a
I got you.
Swahili lingua franca region, you can look for people who speak Swahili and then figure out based on like country or just like you can send them a message and see if they speak that language.
And just keep trying,
Um,
keep trying, keep trying.
yeah,
Yeah, persistence pays
exactly.
off.
Yeah.
Okay.
And also, like obviously it's not quite ideal, but usually there's media surrounding some language. So if you can find movies and songs, obviously it's not perfect, but at least you get to hear the language and like songs can be a good thing. Sometimes it's fun to like work through song lyrics or something with a native speaker. Maybe that's a good way for you to like have something to even study with a teacher, right? Um, yeah.
And then okay. Um and then something which obviously you've done is try to actually have real conversations with the speakers, because obviously you've
Mhm.
been to Jordan, you've been to
Mhm.
India, um you had your exchange partner come
Right.
and live with you for so long. So I imagine that's something you recommend if you can have that
Yes.
happen. Like,
Definitely. I would
also
say
this
that's how
we
I
wanted to come back to this. I wanted to hear more about your
yeah.
experience with your exchange partner. Like, so
Yeah.
she went to school with you, and for the
Mhm.
whole year, it was an opportunity for you to have someone to like be speaking with.
Speak out. Exactly. Yeah.
What was it like? What was your level like at the beginning compared to the end?
Oh, so different. I mean, now I feel like I can have a conversation with someone in Bengali, whereas before I didn't. I mean, I could write you something, but I didn't feel like I could have a real conversation with you. I still struggle speaking Bengali. Honestly, I feel like it's the language with the thought process that's the most different from English that I'm learning.
Ooh.
Yeah, so it's just like the way I would word sentences. It's like
Right, so
I
the
have to
syntax is totally
completely just
different.
change, and not even like the syntax of, but
Red
just
dog
like
run
how you
or
say
something
it.
like that. I don't know.
Yeah,
Wait, hold on.
exactly.
I don't feel like I even mixed up the red dog runs. No, runs dog red. I
Yeah.
tried to mix it up and I didn't. That's insane.
You did it right.
Wow.
Exactly. But
Good one.
even more than syntax, like something just about like the thought process is like
I
I
kind
like
of get what
sometimes
you
it's
mean, yeah.
just like I want to say something and then I try to say it and they're like, "What?" And then I tell them in English and then they give me this translation and I'm like, "Oh, that
We
makes
don't
sense."
do that
But like
here.
never in a million years would I have said it that way.
Yeah. Yeah. No,
So,
no, no.
but I mean, yeah, like I definitely got much better at speaking after that year with her, and also like I had studied only the like standard sort of Indian or Kolkata accent, and then she was from Dhaka, so I learned a bit of like Dhaka accent.
Yep.
So now I can
Oh,
speak fairly like
we
in both.
we also forgot about this. What advice do you have for people specifically learning
Uh,
um the languages you've learned?
that I'm learning. Okay. Um, okay. I've gone on this forever, but like try to make it shorter. So
Well,
Bangla.
also maybe open with where they can find your extended content on this.
Okay, yeah. So Bangla, like I said, I'm about to have this big project. So biggest advice, just look out for that project. Check my Instagram. I'll link to it because
Okay.
that project will have links to everything else that I know of. And I'm going to make lots of like posts and stuff sort of on this topic of how to learn Bangla, how to use my blog effectively, everything like that.
Okay. Follow you on Instagram, follow your blog. And to
Yes.
do that, go to the podcast description. Step 1.
Yes.
All right.
Arabic. Arabic is interesting because modern standard Arabic, there's quite a few resources available. That's also not really my focus, so I'll leave that to someone else. But in terms of Arabic dialects, which have less resources than standard, when I started learning, I thought that there was really not that many resources. And over time, I've come to know of so many. Um, so Arabic dialects, if you're studying one, I do have one post on my Instagram that lists a bunch of resources for Levantine dialect specifically.
I'll find it and I'll link it in the podcast description.
Okay. There's this one website called Playling, PlayALING. I think it's .com. It might be .org or something, no. But that website is amazing because it is short videos in Arabic that you can filter by dialect and difficulty level. And there's bilingual captions in the Arabic dialect and English.
I will link to this as well for people.
Yeah. So that is an amazing resource. And for Arabic dialects,
insane.
actually, I know, it's amazing. So there's actually quite a few like different textbooks, different online courses. So I would say Arabic, I could tell you lots of specific ones, but I would say look around, look for one that's good for you. Don't think that there's no resources because there's actually quite a few, especially for Levantine, Egyptian, and actually Moroccan. Other things like Gulf, Iraqi, might be a little bit more difficult, but yeah.
Okay. I'll listen back through this whole podcast. I'll make sure I don't miss anything. Okay.
Yes.
All right. I don't know where we were otherwise. Otherwise it's people now will have an idea of like how to study these languages. It's been interesting to hear a lot about your experience. I noted down a few things. I'll make sure we're not gonna leave with anything that I wanted to ask, which I haven't asked. Oh,
yeah, I know I talk a lot. Sorry if I'm like going on.
It's perfect for a podcast. Podcast is a time to be talking a lot. I do have more questions actually. I wanted to hear about what it's been like having to learn new scripts because all of these languages have different scripts.
Yeah. This is actually, I'm supposed to go on another podcast. It was supposed to be this week, but it might be a little bit later where we're going to talk about scripts specifically. I love
what is
scripts.
What is the other podcast?
Super fun. Geopats podcast. Geopats, I think. Yeah.
In any case, I can text you and I'll put it I'll put it in the description as well for the podcast.
Yes.
Okay.
So honestly, it's interesting because I hear a lot of people say, I want to learn Arabic or something, but I'm just so scared of like learning the script. It seems so difficult. And to that I say, like, you want to learn Arabic, or whatever language, you want to take on this like years-long journey, hundreds of thousands of words and grammar rules, and you're scared of like 30 letters. Like, if you can memorize hundreds of thousands of words, you can take 2 weeks and memorize 30, 40 letters. So I think people get scared of scripts more than they need to. If you just, except for Chinese, that's always my little caveat. I don't have experience with Chinese. I can't say on that. Almost any other script that's not that kind of system is going to have...
I can say something on Chinese, and the surprising thing about Chinese is, which is already happening to me, and I don't know that many characters. I probably know 500. I probably can write a few hundred, and then I can recognize probably 500, 600. The thing which you start noticing already at this level is things repeat themselves a lot, in the sense that there are a finite number of radicals which give you a hint of the meaning, and then there are a lot of repeated kind of components where you start basically some character will be made up of multiple other characters you already know. And then so it does actually you think it's this insurmountable wall,
Right.
the Great Wall around the language, but really, actually, it's starting to
right.
get easier for me. But anyway, go
So
on. I
so
don't want to
even so
interrupt you.
even for Chinese, the writing system is maybe not something you have to be as scared of as you think.
Yeah,
Um,
maybe a little scared,
yeah.
but yeah.
Maybe a little. Yeah. But I would say, yeah, I mean, I would, depending on the difficulty level, I think it's completely possible to learn a new script in like 2 weeks to a month. I mean, if you
What
just
about little
learn like 3 new
diacritics,
ones a day.
like beyond like
Mm,
the like vowels and consonants? Like, what about all the little extra? I mean, they're called
so
diacritics. I don't know the little extra things that.
yeah, so there's different kinds of writing systems, right? There's like alphabets, which is what we're probably most familiar with, and that's like the Latin alphabet, Cyrillic alphabet. So those work in the same way that those work, like English isn't Latin alphabet's an alphabet, obviously. So it works in the way we're used to, where it's consonants and vowels, and they are sort of on an even playing field, and you just put them in an order. And obviously, some languages have more complicated rules about that than others, but like if you're learning Cyrillic or something, and I think like Georgian, I think it's an alphabet too, it's gonna be like a similar, you're just learning characters to represent the sounds. um Bengal, there's other kinds of writing systems.
Yes, I've read about
For
this.
example, yeah, like so Bengali is a abugida, also Arabic is a abjad. So the way
Yes.
Bengali works is, yeah, like it's vowels and consonants are not on the same level. You have your vowels, you have your consonants, but the actual symbol of the vowel um is
They
not.
chuck out something sometimes.
Yeah, so it's almost like the vowels are like a step below. So if the vowel ever comes after a consonant, it just has its own like vowel diacritic, a little like sign that represents that vowel. And then that sign is always written like on the consonant, basically. So in Bengali, it might be after the consonant, it might be before, it might be around, it might be underneath, depending on the vowel.
Oh, okay.
um, but you will still use those like full vowel signs if it's the vowel itself, or if the vowel is not after a consonant. So, or if you have like two vowels in a row or something,
Okay.
because the vowel diacritics can only attach after a consonant.
Right.
Um,
But even then, and like you're saying, this is still something you can get used to in a matter of weeks, maximum like a
right.
month.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, like you can, if you just learn the individual signs, and then you just have to learn like exactly how it works exactly. And I think in 1 month you can be comfortable with, I mean, probably slow, but I think in 1 month you can know all the basics, everything you need to know.
And then just keep reading, and once you've got that foundation, you
Exactly. And
all of a
if
sudden,
you're
yeah.
actually learning the language, you're going to be constantly exposed to reading it, to writing it. So
It's not like you have to
like I
consciously
don't.
revise the alphabet every
Exactly,
week,
exactly. Like the like it, maybe you have to for the first two
or
to four
not the
weeks.
alphabet. The what was it called? The ab.
The abugida.
Yeah, yeah, that one.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, but after the first two, and I always recommend starting with that. Like I always will learn the writing system first, and then because if you don't learn it first, if you just start using like, you can use romanization maybe in the beginning to, if you're not so comfortable with the script, but I would always use it in conjunction with the script, because otherwise you get like 2 months in, you know all these words and you don't know how to spell them. Whereas
Yeah.
if you learn the alphabet first, like you go through the whole thing, like actually knowing how to spell words, getting used to the writing system. So that's always what I like would recommend doing.
In the long run, it probably reduces the workload if you just learn, like you learn the
Definitely.
script first, and then you learn the word, and as you learn the word, you attach the proper writing of it. Yeah, yeah,
Exactly. That's what I think. Yeah. And I think that sometimes, when you have heritage speakers who don't know how to read or write, that's when it's a really daunting task of like, you speak this language, but to know how to read and write it, you have to go back and learn how to spell every single word.
and
Which if you
thousands, so it's gonna be like,
exactly.
yeah.
Whereas if you're a beginner and you know 5 words in the language, well, you only have to learn how to spell 5 words. So
Upside of
yeah,
being a
so that's
beginner.
exactly exactly. So that's why I would learn it from the beginning.
Right. So every language you learn, if there's a different script, you learn the script, and then
Mhm.
actually maybe briefly just outline that a little bit, like how you study a language from kind of beginning to kind of the levels you're at now.
Yeah.
Script, textbook.
Yeah. So, I mean, it depends on each language, like what I'm doing with it exactly. But yeah, I learn the script. While I'm learning the script, I probably learn the basics, beginning phrases, like introduce yourself kind of thing. And then pretty much from there, I just try to go into like what we were talking about before, like the most useful vocabulary. So I try to learn the basic grammar structures that are going to be the most useful to me in speaking, the vocab that's going to be the most useful to me right away. And then I try to use that like from the beginning. I try to have conversations with friends or native speakers. Um, yeah, and then I mean, I just go from there. I build on that knowledge. Sometimes I
Yeah, well,
work through a textbook, or if there's a specific like grammar topic that I know I'm confused about, like I said with German, I will just like look it up, write some notes. I use a lot of flashcards, so I use Anki, like all that
let's
new
go.
vocab,
Anki, let's
sentences,
go.
like grammar structures, put that into Anki.
Do you do a lot of reading or listening when you can? Like, I know there's limited resources with a lot of your languages, but
reading and writing are definitely areas I need to work on because I like really enjoy having conversations. Obviously, I talk a lot, so I will do that. But then if it actually comes down to like writing something, I'm like, I don't want to do it. So I probably don't I practice reading and writing a lot more if I'm actually in a course, which is making me do that for homework, which is probably a good thing.
yeah, definitely.
Um,
I've been the
but
same. Although I'm
yeah.
starting to get into reading more.
Mm-hmm.
This is something which I realized reading these. If I'm building the habit for a while I'm building the habit now of reading before going to bed, and I look forward to it because I'm reading something which I don't have to stop and look up every second word. So I can just sit
Right.
there and read through it. And I read a lot as a kid. I read a lot in English. Like
Yeah, I did
all of these
too.
books around me, I've read all of
Yeah.
them. And so I like reading, but it's just in a foreign language, it's hard because normally what you're doing intensive reading where it's so much effort to read, but having something which is a graded reader of my level makes it fun.
Right.
So I think
Exactly.
I've found a way to get myself to read more and build the
That's
habit.
cool. Yeah.
So yeah, I just
Yeah,
wanted to add that in.
no, yeah. I I think for Bengali and Arabic, maybe that comes back to what we were talking about before, where like the even in like a more basic level book, like the vocab that they use in writing is just so different from what you speak. And for Arabic especially, I mean, it's modern standard Arabic versus the dialect. So I haven't like read so much in those languages. German I've tried a little bit. I've gotten some like different novels and stuff. Some novels that like I've read in English and then try to read them in German. So I've done a little bit of that.
Have you ever read a graded reader, like one designed for learners?
I don't think I have actually.
Because neither had I. Like
Uh-huh.
I like, for example, I haven't, like, in the grand scheme of things, I haven't had that much experience learning languages. Like I have compared to someone who doesn't learn languages, but compared to people who really spend a lot of time learning languages, like I'm still
Mhm.
relatively new to the game. Like I know
Yeah.
it sounds a little weird from someone who's like way into languages and things, but I kind of recognize that. Like
No,
by
yeah.
the time I got to the point where I was using my French to read a lot outside of class, I was already at the level where I could read an authentic book made
Mhm.
for French people, but it would be
Right.
so much effort. So I just skipped
Yeah.
the graded readers and went into this laborious reading. Some are
Mhm.
easier. Some are easier than others. I'm turning
Yeah.
around because I'm looking at the books.
Yeah, yeah.
But some,
That's a little bit more me with like German.
yeah. So
Mhm.
I'm thinking maybe I'm gonna go and like find really advanced graded readers. So
Mhm.
they're advanced graded readers, but still they're not as hard as authentic texts. And
Yeah.
that's what I'm going to read before bed. So it's like
Uh-huh.
very little effort. There's like
Yeah,
1% of
that's
the
a good
words I don't
idea.
know. Yeah.
Right. I should do that with German.
Yeah. I mean, this is also why I want to do these
Yeah.
podcasts because it's like
Yeah,
sharing
exactly. Get
tips.
more
It's like
ideas. Yeah.
we're all like honing our study skills and
Exactly.
like,
Yeah, no, I definitely need to work on that, like reading, writing kind of thing.
but like I said, this is new to me. I've like I've been saying online, like, I'm totally a speaking and listening guy, you know, I don't read that much.
Yeah.
But now that I've found a way to make the reading less laborious and more enjoyable and just a habit of made a habit out of it where I just am starting to do it before bed, I'm like,
Yeah.
I could do more of this.
Right. Yeah, I think that's my problem is that I don't really enjoy it that much right now, but maybe because it's too difficult.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Like not too difficult for you to understand, but like too difficult in the sense of you're not just gonna on this at a random moment before bed gonna like
Yeah.
pick up the book because you feel like it, because it's like, no, I need to
Right.
grab the dictionary in my phone, like
Right,
translate
exactly,
things.
exactly. I can't
Yeah.
just, like, sit down and read it, yeah.
And I've also another thing is the reason I haven't read before bed is because like I still do this though sometimes, but I know I shouldn't, and I try not to. Is like I try not to bring technology with me to bed. But like
Mhm.
reading, if I'm reading without technology, it takes so long to look through a dictionary. So I might as well have the
Yeah,
technology to quickly look it up.
right.
But I don't want to do that. So I'm like, okay, I won't read. I'll read an English book or something.
Right. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's always a struggle balancing it. 'Cause
Yeah.
I know there's some, like, websites and stuff that are basically, like, graded readers, and you can, like, click on the words that you don't understand and just
Yeah.
automatically get the translation. I haven't really used that so much,
Link
but
is
I
one
just
of them.
prefer reading, like, a real book.
Same is
I
something
know
so
it's
nice
such a
about having.
cliche thing, but it's just like yeah,
I'm the same. Yeah,
yeah,
I'm the same. I much prefer like having something. Also, it's just the technology on your eyes before bed. If you're gonna read before
yeah,
bed, you don't want
exactly.
it to be like you don't want to be up at like
Right.
up on your
Staring at the
laptop. It's like
screen.
yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
All right. Well, I think we've
Yeah.
covered a lot of ground. I've learned a lot of new things.
Yeah,
Thanks for coming along and having this chat. I really enjoyed it. I think
of
people will
course, this was
also
really
find it
fun.
as yeah. I honestly, I think as long as I've found that I've learned a lot and found the conversation interesting, I think everyone else has got to find it interesting as well.
Mhm.
I hope so. You know, that's
I
that's
hope so.
my kind of that's my kind
Yeah.
of litmus test for if I think an episode's gone well. If I found it interesting, if I enjoyed it, if I learned things, I'm like, this went
Yeah,
well.
exactly.
So I
Don't
think
wanna
today
record
went
an
really well.
episode and be like, "Oh, that was boring to make."
No, you obviously don't want that to happen. But also, like, I'm
Yeah.
inviting people on who I've like watched their stuff. I'm like, this is going to be
Yeah.
interesting. I have questions. So,
Yeah.
all right. Well,
Yeah,
thank you so much for
exactly.
coming along.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
I'll make sure I link to your stuff. But yeah. Otherwise, I'll stop the recording here. So to our
Yeah,
podcast
sounds
listeners,
good.
goodbye. Thank you for listening to this episode.
Bye.
All right, guys, I hope that you enjoyed the video. If you've watched until now, you're an absolute champion. And if you want to go check out the podcast, feel free to go check out the podcast, Ace Talks Language, the Ace Talks Language podcast. It'll be available on any podcasting platform you could want to listen to it on: Apple Podcasts, Spotify, your Google Podcasts app. It doesn't matter, it'll be there. Also, I'd love to hear what you thought of the things that were discussed. And if you want to discuss them more with me, then just leave a comment and I'll look forward to chatting with you guys. Otherwise, you know, all the usual stuff, like, subscribe. I think that all helps with the YouTube algorithm and it'll help other people see the video. In any case, thanks for watching and I'll see you later.